Hi, today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Visual Studio Code and a few things about it from the perspective of somebody that doesn't necessarily know coding already, that's not already a seasoned programmer, because we've noticed that a lot of the materials out there on the web that are teaching people about Visual Studio Code are kind of focused on an existing skill set that you may or may not possess. So if you possess that skill set, you can probably just skip this video because it's going to be very introductory. If you don't possess that skill set, then definitely listen on, because we're going to try to fill in a few of the gaps that preempt the rest of the knowledge that you need to be gathering about Visual Studio Code. So just a few things that are interesting to know about Visual Studio Code is that it's by Microsoft. Microsoft, of course, is the company that you may or may not have heard of. You probably have heard of Microsoft. They made Windows, so you are working with and being influenced by and impacted by Microsoft on a daily basis. In fact, probably everybody in the world, unless they never interact with technology, is going to be impacted somehow by Microsoft. Very, very far reach, and they, for a long time, have been creating these code editors, and Visual Studio Code is one of those. Now, there is a difference between Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio is a super robust it's something called an IDE, an Integrated Development Environment, and Visual Studio is one of the industry standards for very, very extremely robust integrated development environments. You can develop in multiple languages, you can deploy, you can collaborate with other teammates. It's just extremely enterprisey and big and very useful, but maybe not exactly what you need while you're learning to code. So that's why Visual Studio Code exists. So to differentiate between Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, we often just say VS Code. So if you hear us talking about VS Code, we're actually talking about Visual Studio Code. It's just not correct to just call it Visual Studio, because that is a completely different thing. So get used to calling it VS Code. It'll roll off the tongue a lot easier, and it's actually Googleable. You can type in VS Code and you'll find the same kinds of great resources on VS Code as you can if you type out the whole Visual Studio Code. Now the thing is, if you type in Visual Studio trying to search for information about code, you're not going to find it. You're going to find Visual Studio things, which are going to completely confuse you and knock you off your horse. So VS Code. And of course, you use it for code. So anything that has to do with code, if it's JavaScript code or HTML code or CSS code or any of the code that you're going to be using throughout your journey in Codex Academy, you can do it in Visual Studio Code or VS Code. So now if you're thinking about graphics, if you're talking about like trying to create a nice looking button, or if you're trying to move a graphic, or create a logo, or create a layout for a web page or something like that, that would be a different kind of tool, not a coding tool, but more of a graphics tool. If you're going to write a document or create a presentation, you'd use a presentation creator or a word processing program like Microsoft Word or Google Docs, something like that. Those are not code. Those are for a completely different purpose. And then if you're doing something in your time with Codex Academy using just code, then it would be VS Code. So that's a quick primer on VS Code as a thing, as a product, as a tool. Let's take a look at the actual tool in action. First, let's take a look at what we want to learn about VS Code, what we want to master. So we're going to go into the external criteria here and take a look at this list right here in the top. So I want to be able to install VS Code on my computer. That's probably fairly straightforward. We're going to install and use some extensions like Pretty or Power Mode. So we need to be able to do that kind of thing. We need to be able to monitor the editor settings globally or per language. That can come in handy when we start to work with more languages and we might want one to have a certain font size than another. Also, we want to be able to use the embedded terminal. This doesn't necessarily mean that I need to be able to like navigate and use code, use the not code, but the commands in the terminal. and like navigate folder structures and stuff like that. It's more about just knowing where the terminal is and how to like turn it on. So we'll go over that. How to open files and close tabs. So that's actually pretty straightforward and easy, but we'll show it here because you never know. You might need a little refresher on that, or just maybe I'll show you some keyboard shortcuts that you can use as well. Formatting code using keyboard shortcuts is also a really useful skill, so that's something that we'll be able to do here as well. By the way, this suggested learning down here is actually really great. Just keep in mind that they're trying to teach you every nook and cranny of Visual Studio Code, and same thing with Microsoft's Getting Started. They want to teach you everything possible, like all 5,000 things about VS Code. Really, we just need you to know and master these 6 things. So that's pretty much it. So let's actually just dive in. Let's try it out. So I'll keep this here because if I'm a student in Codex Academy, then it's always a good idea for me to keep this list actually front and center right here, so that I can make sure that I'm learning what I need to learn for the skills for the badge. I don't want to overlearn, and I definitely don't want to underlearn, because I want to be able to pass the evaluation. So let's take a look. So here is the website for Visual Studio Code. To find this, what I did was I just typed in my Google search VS Code, and it came up as the first result here. So if I just go in here, it has right there on the front page like a download button. This is actually pretty common for software and tools. It's really helpful that they just put it front and center there for us. It's a common practice now. So it knows that I'm on a Mac, so I can click download for Mac, or if it doesn't peg me, then I can always choose the other one of the other platforms manually. So there's Windows, you can click the little download arrow and it'll download it. So downloading, in case you didn't know, downloading is to bring something from the cloud down into my computer. So if I send something from my computer up into the cloud, then I am uploading, but I am downloading VS Code for my Mac. So let's click that. And it's already started. There it goes. I've got fairly nimble internet, so it's going to be about 30 seconds or so, and it gives me some tips on getting started. That's kind of nice. Of course, a lot of this stuff is definitely, admittedly, it's geared toward people who already know how to develop software. They're just trying to market their product to developers. If you're not already well versed in software development, if you're not a programmer yet, then you look at this stuff and okay, that doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not getting started with that today, and which is completely understandable. So now I've stalled enough. I can click down here and open this up. It's going to download it, or it's going to open the zip file. And so now I've got my zip file, and I'm just going to double click, and it's going to open it up. A new file right there, so I'm just going to double click that, and it's loading for the first time. It says verifying. Okay, I'll say open again. I can close that folder now. I don't need the folder anymore. And there we are. I have Visual Studio Code, VS Code, right here on my computer. It didn't really take very much time for me to download it and install it. And there, I have successfully taken care of the first skill that I need for this. So I've installed VS Code. The next thing is extensions. So extensions are, you'll know more about this as time goes on. As you spend more time working with code, you'll start wanting other extensions that help with this and that. And so in this case, we're going to go with some of the easiest extensions, which are one is called Prettier. It's very, very common. It's a way to format code, and I'll say it slower. It's prettier. So like this basket is prettier than that basket. So it's that word prettier. And what it's trying to do is trying to make your code prettier. So I'm going to go here to this little box of 4 boxes, where one is going to form the complete square, and that's the extension section. Now, I want to point something out. You can't really see this probably, but if you go into your own VS Code and just hover your mouse over something, a lot of times it'll pop up this little thing called a tooltip. If I hover my mouse over this again, it shows me, it tells me with words what the thing is, and it also lets me know a keyboard shortcut. So if you look next to that, it's kind of small on my screen. It just went away, but it shows me these symbols mean Shift Command X. So if I were to not be in the extensions, I can do Shift Command X, and boom, it pulls up this extensions thing. So if this is something that you've got to do commonly, like a lot, then you might want to learn and memorize that keyboard shortcut. And one thing that I'll tell you also, just a tip, is when I'm learning a new tool that has new keyboard shortcuts that are different from what I'm used to, I will often keep a little notebook next to my desk, and I'll just write them down. So in this one, I would say is open extensions, Shift Command X, and then that gives me this extensions window right here, instead of me having to click it with my mouse. So the next thing we want to try to do is to install an extension. So let's search for an extension here, and we're actually going to search for Prettier, since we're already talking about it. And I'm just typing in here at the top, and it comes up with a few different options. The top one is, in this case, the correct one. You can see that there are other versions of Prettier for different types of technologies, and this one's for handlebars. This one's got Now, ESLint, Standard. This one is another one. It looks like the same one as the top one, Prettier Code Formatter, and then it's got a 2.07. If you notice, this one has 2.07. This one has 5.9.2. So even though it has the same name, you can see that this one's a little bit newer. Also, if you could just click on it, you'll be able to see that this one has 11 million downloads, and it's got these stars. So this is the one. This is the one. So if we go over here to this one's got way less. Still got a lot of stars, but it's got way less, and it's a lower version. So probably what Visual Studio Code is doing for me is it's trying to guess which one I want, and it's putting it first. So in this case, this is definitely the one. So if you click here on this install button, it will actually install this extension for me, and it's done actually. I just installed it. It's now installed. So now I can disable it or uninstall it. And what's nice about that is I didn't have to go to a website and download something. I didn't have to go to my folder structure and find where the zip file was or anything like that. I just had to click an install button. So this one right here, this page gives me some information about what Prettier is, and here's a description. There's even, you can click here and go to the website to learn more about Prettier. It supports these languages. It's got some of these things which you don't know about yet necessarily. You don't have to know. Installation is pretty straightforward. We actually already did most of that. This is actually pretty interesting right here. It starts getting into, look at that, specific languages. And so I know that's one of the things over here that we need to be able to do. So let's go ahead and say we checked this one off. We have installed Prettier, so that's done. So now let's modify the editor settings globally and per language. And so one thing that I might need to do is actually do this right here. I need to set the default editor for my Visual Studio Code to use this esbenp.prettier-vs code. And you can also see right here that you can set this as the default formatter just for JavaScript. See how this is structured right here? Now for this badge, you don't have to know about this format right here that's called JSON with the curly braces and the quotes and the colors and things like that. That's called JSON, J-S-O-N. You don't have to know about this and how it works, but it is nice to be able to copy and paste things. So I can actually copy this and right click, or not. My right click's not working, so I'm just going to do Control C. And I can actually go to my settings, which we'll do in just a moment, and I can paste that in. So if you want, you can scroll down and read more about Prettier to really understand what's happening, what it's doing. You also might get some hints for some other requirements on the badge, like formatting code using a keyboard shortcut. See that right there? Format document using a keyboard shortcut. Got more keyboard shortcuts here. Also, I like this right here. I like formatting on save. That it's good to know the keyboard shortcut for formatting your code, but it's also nice that it just, whenever you click save, it just automatically formats the code for you. It's kind of a nice thing, because I don't always remember to format my code, but I do often save my files. So I'm scrolling through, and there's a lot to this. You can see it's many pages. I wouldn't try to learn everything about it. It is good to know that you got this resource here when you need it, if there's some other setting that you want to make. So let's, I'm going to copy this whole block right here. And again, my right click isn't working, so I'll just do Control C. So, so let's leave this just for right now, and let's go back out to Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to open a folder just for now, and I'll open, I don't know, I'll just open this folder where I am right now. Ooh, lots and lots of files, but at least I have an index.html here, which is, yeah, that's good enough. Okay, so so if I click Control P in Visual Studio Code, then Command P on my keyboard, then it gives me a list of all the files that I can open. If I do Control Shift P, it brings up what's called the command palette. And if I start typing in settings, then I can open the open settings JSON, or I can open settings UI. So if I open the UI version of the open settings, then it gives me this nice looking list with drop downs and fields that I can fill in and type. You can also get to this by going to this little gear in the bottom left hand corner and going to settings. So it's going to take you to the same place. And this is just a graphical way of seeing the settings. There are lots and lots of settings in here that you may never need. They are here if you ever need them. See, this is autosave. So if I want to just always save as I leave the window, then I can say on focus change or on window change. Or if I want to have it save after 10 seconds, then I can have after delay, things like that. I personally wouldn't do autosave because that would be a little bit weird. But if I need my font to be bigger in general, I can change it here. It'll change the font for every single language. So let's close this and let's take a look at the other one. So I'm going to do Control Command or Shift Command P, and I'm going to type in settings again. And this time I'm going to open settings JSON. So let's do that. And so now you can see that that I've got this little construct here, and I'm going to paste. So you can see here it added the code that I copied from the Prettier settings page or documentation. And so what this is doing is it's telling Visual Studio Code to use the Prettier VS Code, and it's also saying to anytime you see JavaScript, it should use the Prettier VS Code. This is basically redundant, but this is at least illustrating to us one way that you can make editor changes or settings changes just for one language. So if I wanted to do CSS, I could do something like this, CSS, and I let it kind of fill in a few things for me, but I can say editor.font size, and we'll do 19, massive. So I'll save that. And so this is basically saying that anytime I'm in a CSS file, it should be 19, big letters. But if I'm in HTML or anything else, then it should be, we'll say font, let's see, Yeah, well, I'll just start typing editor font size and it'll do it for me. There we go. It'll be 12 in any other case, but if it's CSS, it'll be 19. So let's try that out. I'm going to go over to the HTML. This must be 12. And then I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to say byron.css. Ooh, here is body. Here is CSS, much bigger font size. So color red, that's CSS. So then HTML, much smaller, CSS, much bigger. And it's because we set a language specific setting here for font size 19, and then we have another one that's just general for everybody. Now if I wanted to do JavaScript another font size, then I could do that as well. You can get all kinds of crazy with all of these settings. While we're here in this JSON, I will mention to you that there are a few things that you need to know about JSON if you're having problems, especially with the JSON. So if you just copy and paste it and it seems to work out of the box, you don't have to troubleshoot anything, then fine. But if you do run into problems, I'll just give you a quick primer, like 30 seconds primer on JSON. Basically, everything's going to be inside of these curly braces. So you got to have one at the top, one at the bottom. Every time you have an opening something like a parentheses or a brace or a bracket or a quote, you got to have a closing. So you got to have one on the top, one on the bottom here. And then I'm going to basically set something up. I'm going to do a key and value and a comma. So I always have to have a comma at the end. And if I could spell, so I'm doing a little, I don't think that's going to work, but we'll see. So I have to have a comma at the end of every line. So you can see here's a comma at the end of this line, there's a comma at the end of this line. Now this one doesn't have a comma. Why? Because it has a curly brace. But then after you're finished with those curly braces, it has a comma. Same thing here, open curly brace. This one doesn't have a comma because it's the last one. So you don't normally have a comma at the end, just like you don't have one here. So here, this editor font size, that's called the key, and then the value after that is the value, and there has to be a colon in between. So if you're running into problems where you've got like red underlines like this and things aren't colored properly, then you maybe hover your mouse over it and see if it tells you what's going on. And eventually it says here expected a comma. Well, my line has a comma, but the line above it didn't. So I'll just add a comma and everything's good to go again. So instead of leaving this here, I'm going to take it out because if I leave it in there, it'll probably send VS Code into a tizzy, is what we say in Tennessee, a tizzy. So I'm actually going to move this back. I don't want this crazy font size for CSS, so I'll put it back, and now it's just adopting the font size of the global settings. This is global here outside of a language, and these are language specific, which are inside of language. Okay, let's take a real quick look at the embedded terminal. So let's go here, terminal, new terminal, and that's it. I mean, you can do some commands here. ls is a listing of the folder. You can also type in cd and it'll do something, and ls again. So you don't have to know anything about the terminal to be able to do this. You just need to know how to turn it on. So how did I do that? You couldn't see where I did that because I was doing it out of the other window. So actually, if you click at the top of your screen, and sorry you can't see it on my screen, but if you click at the top of the screen, there's going to be a terminal option. So it'll be File, Edit, Selection, View, Go, Run, Terminal, right before Window and Help. So when you click Terminal, then you'll be able to just say New Terminal, and it'll pop up right down here in the bottom of your screen. There's also a keyboard shortcut. So if I were to do Shift Command P and just type in terminal, then I can open a new external terminal, which it looks like the keyboard shortcut for that is Shift Command C. So let's try that. Shift Command C. No, that opened up a terminal completely outside of VS Code. So, which is also useful. I use these outside of VS Code normally. So let's see if there's another one. So Shift Command P, terminal, and here's another one. Create new integrated terminal, and that looks like it is. I think that's Control Shift and then that back tick. This is like the inverted quote, so, or apostrophe. So it'll be Control Shift and then back tick. So let's try that. Control Shift back tick. There we go. Yeah, that's what did it right there. Now you don't have to use keyboard shortcuts, but I really do recommend it because they help make you faster. Because every time you have to move your hand to the mouse, you have to context shift just a little bit in your brain, and it can interrupt thought processes and things like that. So I definitely recommend it. So open files and close tabs. Let's try that real quick. So I was able to open this index file by clicking it. It opens up over here, so I'm good there. I'm able to close tabs, so we'll do that right there. So it seems simple. You'd be surprised, but that is actually something that you need to know how to do. So just to deepen that just a little bit, you can also go like if you've got a lot of tabs open, and let's see if I can open up a few things. So there we go. So you can actually right click and like close all, or you can close the ones that are saved, so leave the ones that are open that haven't been saved yet. You can close all of them to the right. You can close all the other ones but besides the one that I clicked on, and then you can just close this one. And you can see that there's a keyboard shortcut also for closing the tab, so that's Command W. So if I want to close this one, I can just do Command W and it's gone. So that's opening files and closing tabs. And then the last one is formatting code using the keyboard shortcut. So let's remember what that keyboard shortcut is. I'm going to mess up my formatting here real quick, and I'm just going to do Command Shift P again, and I'm going to type in format. So remember, there's format document, and if I go over here to the right, I can see that there is Shift and then Alt F. Shift Alt F. So that's my shortcut. So if I do Shift Alt F, then it fixes my formatting for me. Kind of nice. So if I do, I don't know, some of this. No, that's not. If I introduce an error, it's not going to work. But like that's not going to introduce an error. But I can just do Shift Alt F. And it fixes the formatting for me. So that's the last thing. It's not a lot. We're just talking about 6 things. I know I took a lot of time kind of talking through things. You could probably demonstrate mastery of those things much faster than I just did. But hopefully this was a good primer for you to understand VS Code a little bit more from a non-programmer perspective. And then hopefully the next time you're trying to dive deeper into VS Code, it'll be because you are a programmer, and then all of the other resources will all of a sudden make sense. All right, have a great day.